So, we are going to talk a little bit more about the Ainu, as Cynthia, the first presenter for today, talked already a lot, so I don't need to introduce the Ainu culture that much. So I will skip a little bit. So this research was made on earlier this year. We went in an exploratory travel to Hokkaido, the northern island of Japan. So Ian, that is in the event in person, and me and myself, and our professor, that was Yaguchi professor at the University of Tokyo. So the presence of the Ainu people as indigenous inhabitants of uh, of Hokkaido, who was the Hokkaido territory was added to Japan only in 1869. So there is a lot of impact of the Japanese colonialism and cultural assimilation, the mainland Japan with the Hokkaido, northern island Hokkaido, and this will be the focus on this research. So the question we are making is whether the exhibitions made by government of Ainu culture in museums can promote a more diverse and inclusive national narrative of a diversity narrative, or if it will further reinforce the image as Ainu as someone exotic, some culture of exotic other in the country cultural history, Japanese cultural history, and how those exhibitions made by the government can differ from the ones made by the Ainu groups or association, so private exhibitions and museums. And for objects related to Ainu collected by museums, the imperial and colonial structures that generate these collections also. So this is a general overview of the research. So what we are using here is the actor network theory that provides a framework for understanding the collection's origins and the evolving of the narrative construction on the collection during the exhibition, and which reflects the national attitude towards cultural diversity, and examining how Aino collections products in various exhibiting contexts in Hokkaido. A paradox arises from different narratives created by diverse agents involved in recognizing and appreciating Ainu culture in contemporary society. So our take, differently from Cynthia a little bit, is going to be on the contemporary representation of culture of the Ainu culture instead of more archaeological and object-based um, um, introduction of the Ainu culture. So a little bit about the legislation of recognition of the Ainu as an ethnic minority in Japan demonstrate the persistent struggle for the Japanese society to acknowledge and respect the presence of the Ainu, as the Ainu were first officially acknowledged by Japanese legislation in 1997. And it was primarily focusing on the Ainu language and cultural access. But as Cynthia mentioned earlier, the Ainu Police Promotion Act is from 2019, so 4 years ago. However, the promotion of Ainu culture is primarily centered on commercialization and ethnic tourism, like Hiyosaki said in 2000s. Despite the official recognition, the Ainu continue to face marginalization and discrimination in Japanese society due to the deeply rooted settler colonial structure in Hokkaido, which is based on white superiority. This means mainland Japanese. And a myth of Japanese homogeneity, or the Japanese as only one society. And the persistence of this colonial structure and ongoing discrimination of the Ainu have lasting impact on their identity control and construction. So now I will talk about the museum itself. First, we have the Hokkaido Museum, as you can see in the pictures. The Hokkaido Museum is the major museum in the Hokkaido area. It's a government administration institution that combines academic research and public education that delivers an official image of Hokkaido that includes the area, history of environment, and industrial and cultural development in the form of exhibitions. Often incorporated into Hokkaido school curriculum, this is an imperative institute that shapes both the image of Hokkaido and the identity of its residents. One corner of the museum is dedicated to the Ainu culture, the culture and the recent history of the Ainu. Composed of themed topics about the Ainu culture, these exhibitions demonstrate an ambitious narrative with an intention to break through the traditional ethnographic portrait of the Ainu culture. The narrative begins with the Ainu in contemporary society, where panels with the cartoon illustration tell a modern story of an Ainu family in contemporary society. By positioning an imagined Ainu boy that you can see on the picture on, I think, your left, um, through recollecting his family memories and tradition. So the narrator, in formal tone, presents the visitors with an introduction to the world of a Japanese individual that carries Ainu heritage within his family history. The exhibits follow a similar layout to those found elsewhere on the other museums we are going to show, featuring objects and materials related to the Ainu culture. These artifacts serve as a supporting materials, providing a glimpse into the pre-modern world. The exhibit covers various aspects of Ainu life. It's not only the contemporary Ainu life, but also includes lifestyle, material culture, and religious beliefs. And also the connection between the Wajin, the mainland Japanese, and Hokkaido Ainu, and brings the exhibits to life. So next we have the Nibutani Ainu Museum. The Nibutani Ainu Culture Museum is located within the area, but its building contracts to the other residences in the neighborhood. As you can see on the first picture, the building, it was planned to shape the roots of a tree, and the museum houses a vast collection of objects donated by the late Kayano Shigeru. I will talk more about him a little bit more later, which have been designated as national importance tangible folk cultural properties. The establishment of this municipal or facility involved prominent ethnographic scholars, architects, exhibition designers, and curators. So it's a quite vast exhibition, and the whole space is dedicated to the Ainu culture. So the use of modern exhibit technique allows for the vivid depiction of pre-modern Ainu living style. This achieved through the collection of specimens, utensils displayed in reenact environments and multimedia demonstration, and not specifically designed architecture that represents Ainu culture. The ethnographic focus of the exhibitions provides a comprehensive understanding of the Ainu material culture. While the exhibit had been carefully curated, it's notable that the two Nibutani Ainu exhibitions, this one and the next one I will also address later, they demonstrate a distinct narrative structure and the participation of different actors, resulting in varying agencies within the collected materials. The Cultural Center exhibit, which is based on the Kayano collection and interpreted by the Japanese academics, specialized in Ainu culture, features a narrative supported by the audience-friendly designs and contemporary ethnographic exhibiting techniques. So it's more about a pre-modern Ainu culture that reinforces the sense of the otherness or a little bit of a distance of contemporary Ainu. And this can lead in increased stigmatization of the Ainu people, increased respect and appreciation depending of the viewer's perspective. So you can see here how the objects are exhibited. You have the Ainu katakana. Ainu language, it's represented in Japanese with the alphabet of katakana, that is alphabet for foreigners language, so not Japanese. And next we have the Nibutani Kayano Shigeru Ainu Museum. These two museums, they are combined, but not that much. You can buy one ticket to get to both museums. So the Nibutani Kayano Shigeru Ainu Museum is a private institution. So the Nibutani, the previous museum, was a public museum. This one is a private institution, and it was established in 1992 by Kayano Shigeru. He was a prominent figure in both local and national Ainu circles. The museum features a collection that reflects the perspective of the Ainu people and their cultural practice. So it's most about the Kayano's personal experience as being an Ainu, and the Ainu advocated for the Ainu community and culture. So this is a museum that were used by the Ainu, and he also in 1983 established Hokkaido first language school using his own resources, according to the Foundation for Ainu Culture website. Collected objects included traditional Ainu objects, replicas, both traditional and contemporary Ainu craftworks, souvenirs created by the Ainu community, most for tourists, and tokens brought in through exchanges with other indigenous communities. So these objects, they are stored in glass cabinets with labels and explanation panels that feels like kind of randomly situated through the Kayano exhibition. And the layout is a little bit confusing, but it almost resembles a collector's vault if we compare to the other exhibitions. As you can see in the pictures, this is a close-up, and you can also find pictures of the Ainu events that were held. So we have a lack of current labeling, unified explanation panel, and even struggling to meet update exhibition or even conservation criteria. But this is a unique exhibition to demonstrate the Ainu collector's personal perspective with his culture. And also on the second floor of this museum, we have the whole floor dedicated to the exchange of the Ainu with other cultures, others indigenous people, even from the Amazon, South America, and other places on this globe. So next is a museum that Cynthia already talked a little bit. It's the Upopoi National Museum and Park. It's the new of them all. So it followed the legislation of 2019. So the Upopoi was opened in 2020 in Shiraoi, Hokkaido. And this initiated a comprehensive array of initiatives to foster Ainu culture. So the museum primary objective is to function as a comprehensive establishment for the preservation and exhibition of the Ainu antiques and cultural objects. Additionally, it operates as a prominent cultural hub, facilitating the dissemination and celebration of the diverse heritage and customs of the Ainu community. once known as the Aino Museum. So this museum, the Upopoi Museum, is a new museum that it existed before as the Aino Museum, and it was renewed, the whole space, for the creation of the Upopoi National Museum and Park. So it was opening, the main goal here was to open for the Tokyo 2020 Olympics during the pandemic. But because of the pandemic, the museum was not receiving visitors for a while. So the museum is the leading institution of promoting Aino culture at the moment, the biggest one and the one that gets more funds. And it's more um, the predominant linguistic in this museum is the Ainu, also showed in katakana. But of all these museums, the Upopo is the one that have more global approach. Like you have the translation for Japanese, English, Chinese, and Korean of the labeling and materials produced. So the Ainu civilization primarily relied on oral traditions. So that's why it's so hard to represent them or their cultures, because they are mainly oral speaking culture. So the exhibitions has 6 distinct topics. That is our language, our universe, our lives, our history, our work, and our exchange. And also there is an audio guide you can use with a smartphone. And there is a lot of partnerships and collaboration with the Ainu community. We were able to meet Ainu people there. But the museum provides a well-managed environment and utilizes advanced facilities to accommodate performance and traditional ceremonies. So you have some interactive aisles that you can touch the objects made by traditional Ainu objects. And you have the representation of the hunters and gatherers, Ainu people from the past. You also have this all from the contemporary Ainu people. And here is the theater where they can accommodate their performances and traditional ceremonies, but they can you also use outside. But when we went there, it was winter, so a lot of snow, and they were holding the events inside. So the despite the engagement with the community, the upkeep of the facilities and diverse utilization of media, multimedia exhibition techniques, most events adhere a narrative structure reminiscent of the conventional ethnographic portrait. So we have this distance. So the culture of the Ainu traditional and the contemporary. So it feels like we are stepping in undisturbed utopia that fails to acknowledge the historical context that shapes the current difficulties advancing the promotion of the Ainu culture. Something that we can find in our next museum. Our center is the Hokkaido Ainu Culture Center, the Ainu Association of Hokkaido. So they are one of the um, group of Ainu people that fights for Ainu rights since the beginning, since before the legislation, the first one. It's a small exhibition room conveniently located in a government building, so a civil center, and it's a short walk from the Sapporo station. So the exhibition introduces Ainu culture, and it has sections displaying objects testifying to the traditional relationships between Ainu and multiple people, including Japanese, Chinese, and Russians. The exhibition's second part, this one, illustrates the transformation of the Ainu community from the pre-modern period to the contemporary fight for recognition and respect of their culture. Objects including literature, publications, old photos, delegated flags, personal objects important to the Ainu representatives in the exhibits, and are vividly portrayed in the Ainu indigenous movement. That is something we only see on that exhibition. we don't really see much about the fight and struggles about the Ainu people on the other exhibitions, primarily the government ones. We can barely see it, but in the private one, it's mentioned. So in conclusion, this is our references. The Ainu, they are indigenous people of Hokkaido and has long served as a cultural bridge between mainland Japan and islands communities. Despite facing significant marginalization and disadvantage, the Ainu have played an important role in facilitating cultural exchange between Japan and other island populations. However, the narratives of the Ainu culture and their history presented by the museums and cultural institutions they vary greatly depending on the institution's objective and where the funds come from. So the Ainu-led exhibitions often highlights their ongoing struggle for justice and equality, while the exhibition with a stronger presence of administrative institution display characteristic of an under-yielding imperial and colonial past still, but they are showing the will to change that. Also, most of these museums have Ainu people hired on their team to work there. So I step a little bit of my time, but that's all for it. And thank you very much for everyone.
Thank you very much for this presentation. C'était un complément intéressant par rapport à la première présentation de ce matin. We have one question for you, Nicole.
Hello, Nicole. Thank you for this presentation. I have a question about language, and I've noticed that Ainu language is transcribed in katakana in Ainu museums. That's what you've showed us. Now, I'm not a linguist, but I do speak Japanese, and I was wondering if Ainu language, if katakana is adapted to the pronunciation of Ainu language, because to me, katakana is a syllabic alphabet similar to hiragana. It transcribes the same sounds. It's just used for foreign languages, but it's very approximative and it's very Japanese-centered. I mean, it is adapted for Japanese speakers and the way they speak Japanese in how they can grasp other languages, like television becomes terebi and coffee becomes kohi and so on. So it creates a very, very different sound to the actual Ainu language. So what I was wondering is, do you think it is adapted? Perhaps it is, or do you think it's not?
I think it's not 100% adaptedly, but what we can find sometimes, it's not in all the exhibitions, we can find the katakana, but also the alphabet reading of that word or sentence. Or sometimes they even have the audio for that. So it's not in everything, but in some, we do have some examples that there you have the katakana and the alphabet together, so you can read better, but still you can find the same thing as the English transformation for katakana. You can find the difficulties of transforming that sound for the katakana alphabet. That happens, but usually we also have the alphabet following some parts of mostly the labeling. If it's explanation, usually the explanation doesn't have the alphabet reading, only the katakana reading.